Now we have a supply success story that has to be an energizer. So Dan Carroll from PCC and Andrew Fulton from GE will help us through that success story. Welcome, guys.
Thank you. Oh, I'll do podium mic.
Okay.
All right. We'll let Andrew go first since I've already been up here once today.
You let me wander. I'm okay with this. Good afternoon. As Helene said, we are the last speakers, so we'll try not to be too long. But we're here really because we want to share something with you. And I think Ian put it best earlier when he said we're nuts, which is accurate. So we're going to be the dancers today and hope that we can make it a little bit more comfortable for the rest to follow. And so we wanted to kind of share some of the pain, some of the journey, and some of the success that we've had over the past couple of years.
Yeah, and it was really about the partnership between GE Aerospace and PCC, how this works for us, and maybe someone can take some tidbits away. Two larger companies kind of get involved as supplier and customer here. So here's what we want to talk over today. We're going to specifically talk about PFMEAs and our product and safety quality partnership. All right, so product safety is the foundation. And we're on the pillars of quality and engineering, going through what's the end game. For us, it's making successful parts that then we send on to our customer, in this case GE, to make successful engines for the flying public. Some things that are important to talk through as we go through on this is what's worked for us, stakeholder buy-in from the site to the top. And then kind of always having in that mind the voice of the customer all the way through why we do what we do, from the downstream to the end user in this place, the flying public. All right. My favorite time, we're going to talk about IP. We get around that too, and then resources and people as well. But as we go on into that, let's make it a little more personal here right now.
No, and I think to that point, it is personal, right? There's a lot of us here. Raise your hand if you flew here.
Danny flew here, I know, yes.
So we each have our little routine, and some of the leaders this morning exchanged theirs when they get on the plane. What do you think about? What I think about is my uncle. He's a commercial airline pilot. He's been doing it for over 25 years. I think about how do I make sure I bring him home safely? What can I do in my day-to-day job? What can we do in our day-to-day job to ensure ourselves and those that we love are safe? I know, Dan, you have another excellent personal story.
Yeah, so when I tell the same story Eric was telling about, we go in PCC, we're doing regional meetings, and I tell this same story. And it revolves around this bracelet right here. And my daughter made me this bracelet. And so when I'm going through and making tough decisions, and we all make tough decisions every day, and it goes through, and my daughter flies, and I think about it, and I said, would I make the same decision that I'm making now if I knew that my daughter was going to be on that airplane? So that's always the constant reminder that I have. I look down at it, it's just there. I wear it, even though it doesn't match this outfit, I wear it every day just to kind of go through, and that's my personal thing that I make to go through. Would I make that same decision if my loved ones, what are you thinking about when it's on that? Because what we do is tough. It's not easy. We're, putting tons of metal in the air and expecting it to stay in the air, right? So, and then we got another kind of personal quote coming up here on the next slide.
We do, and it was my privilege to join the Boeing Supplier Quality Conference about a month ago, and I do see some familiar faces that have heard this quote, and this quote came from Lieutenant Colonel Chris Gaffman from the 56th Air Refueling Squadron. He said, "I take it for granted that they will run." And then he proceeded to give us examples of Rolls, Safran, GE, Pratt & Whitney engines, and all the different sorties he's flown. And he said, for that unearned peace of mind, thank you very much. He thanked us Because he said when he gets in that plane, he does his safety checks, he does everything else, but he does not think about the engines we make. And I want that to resonate with you. We have earned trust. We've earned the flying public's trust. We sometimes don't think of it ourselves. If we're really preoccupied, I'm sitting here, coming here on Monday. I sat there and I didn't think about it. I'm sitting right next to a CF-56. I was in row 17, right in the window seat. I didn't think about it. I was thinking about, what am I going to say?
Yep.
How are Dan and I going to work this? Thinking about other things. It's unearned peace of mind. It's hard-earned peace of mind for the people in this room. We work hard for this. And it's through safety we earn the trust. So going into some of our next step, that's how we started this partnership. We started it with SQDC in that order. Safety first. We're going to talk a little bit about the business impact and how that trust with the flying public is foundational to our business success. Quality keeps that safety assurance. It keeps the trust. By continuing to deliver good product to our end user, we secure that, and that's how we operate our business. And if you do all of those right, we talked about, and we're going to say a little bit here shortly, the wastes, the 7 wastes that come from the cost of poor quality. We listed inventory earlier. I heard movement. I heard WIP, rework. All of those are wastes. Costs will be driven down if we focus on safety, quality, and delivery first, in that order.
Yep. Safety first. That's kind of, so when we started kind of going through this, what's our overall vision? How to have a charter? What are we doing as we're going to go down this? And this all started around with PFMEA is still the goal. We haven't even talked about PFMEA yet, because now we're talking about what's the end game. We're doing this for safety, personal, flying public, safety of the parts we make, the engines that are made. That's what it's gone around. So, because it takes a long time to build that trust up, many decades, right? And it takes a news story, it takes a situation that happens, and then the public kind of changes their mind on that. So quality has mutual business benefits. So when we're going through and when we're thinking about maybe this factory picture is not too dissimilar from what we looked at before, maybe a few stages down, and the defects and dissatisfied customer financial impacts, how do we get around all that? When we're talking about FEMAs and working together, understanding back and forth between the design and the process FEMA, we're shared owners in that risk. Feeding down into the other tools, the process flow diagrams, risks and corrective actions that we work through together, finalizing those plans, and then eliminating those wastes. Because at the end, we want to make our customer happy, and we want to make the flying public happy. So those same things that we've talked about, those same deliverables, delayed shipments, how can we be on time? Well, if we do these things right, we'll improve that. Lost revenue, I think we've kind of pounded it home. If we're continuing to do rework when we should be making parts, well, we can make more parts, and we're going to have increased profitability. And if we're doing all those things that reduce profit, we go flip them the other way, we're making more money. How do you kind of get that buy-in? I've never once gone to a manager, and when I needed more people, said, hey, boss, I need more people, and they said, yeah, cool, that's awesome. That's fine. If I can kind of get it into a dollars and cents of why I need to do that, a lot easier conversation to have. So, SMIG RM 13004 team. Anyone here? Raise your hand. PFMEA team. No? One, two, three. Shout out. We use the same format. So when we were deciding on what to do with the PFMEAs, and rest assured, PCC had their form, and GE had their form when we started this many years ago. And there was a mentor of mine, Jamie, who said, hey, why don't we use that sweet form that's already in the reference manual? And then it was like, that was the basis that went through and started. It started where it was meant to be, the whole point of having that RM in there. So the communication as it's coming down from the customers, for us, we make PCC is built to print. We make what we're asked to make. But we get those through the drawings, the systems, but we're also communicating at the same time. The controlling documents is what controls everything, of course, but we do have other means of communication that we're dealing with on those as well. And then being collaborative between the design and the process FEMA, that just helps everything. Understanding the why. Because a lot of times I'll say, as a supplier, we kind of go through and scratch our head and say, why is that? Tell me why that is. Gee, why is that? And then having that kind of back and forth is like, Simon Sinek, understanding the why. I'm gonna tell you, it does help.
No, and those whys help found our purpose. So when we kicked off the partnership several years ago, we had to put that together. You think about it and we say, oh, this is an easy thing to talk about. We're here for safety. What does that mean? Well, at a raw material level, which is where we started this, if you're making something with an iron inclusion, your people are safe.
Yep.
I respect that. That's the way it should be. Your people are safe. You have the proper containment actions in place when you have a fire, or should you have that. You have preventative actions already there. If we fail to convey to the supply chain, any OEM, the ultimate end user impact, we have an errant RPN. So we had to come to an agreement. We had to say, what is the purpose of this? We said it's safety. It's not just the operator safety. It's not just our engineering sitting in an office safety. This is the end user safety. We had to come to that agreement. And then we had to build a team around that. We built the team, we established the operating cadence, and from those teams came the operation actions. We talk about those, and it's something Chris would have sat here this morning and probably gone on and on for. When we look at creating a team and looking at the impact, when we talk about PFMEA, the impact is a reduction in your RPN number. You increase your detection, you decrease the severity, and you decrease the occurrence rate. When we looked at our purpose with safety as the fixture, we were able to then identify where we needed to put those resources and put those into the work stream that we're then going to be held accountable to by our leadership teams. And we're going to sustain that relationship for ongoing success by making that PFMEA what it truly is, a living document. It's going to be something we look at time and time again. And if we look at stakeholder buy-in.
Yes, repeatedly, and keep on going back to it and learning from it. I think that's a point Chris and Eric kind of really were touching on today. And this is what works for us. So when you go at accountability, and we're not saying we do this across every site, we go through risk-based, which ones are we going to do this with? We agree upon that. But the site teams are meeting weekly, going over, here are the issues that we're having, both ways, who's accountable on both sides, and having that cadence of going through. Then it goes up quarterly to the next level up. And now they're involved and they're talking about, okay, what's right, what's going on, what help do we need, what roadblocks do we have? And then biannually, it goes up to the executive level, going through and saying, what are we stopping for, what's happening, what do we both need mutually to get to the end goal of we want to make the flying public as safe as possible. It's always the vision through that. So having this accountability at each level, and then kind of having the buy-in from the executive teams as well that know what's happening and what's going on and being reviewed, that's something that I think has been pretty successful. A key point in having that and going through with the PFMEAs and as we're going through and making that happen every day. And then the home and away, too, I think is important. I kind of glazed over that one in the middle. GE sites, PCC sites, going back and forth and saying, okay, here's what we're doing on this side, here's what we're doing on the OEM side, making that clear for both parties.
Now, I want to kind of take a look because it came up earlier today, right? We talked about leadership buy-in. The questions were asked of Eric and talked about how Mark has dedicated the team to this. I mean, Dan, what do you think about the engagement from the leadership team and how they've also held us at a working level accountable?
Yeah, so the leadership team, when you kind of get to, sometimes you get to impasse, those happen. right? They definitely, it's not rainbows and unicorns. I know I'm trying to say that all the time. Getting that buy-in from the executive level kind of goes through, chops through all of the misalignment. Maybe someone down at the plant level wasn't kind of getting the message through. So it's like, okay, now let's stop. We're on an even playing ground. This is going to be our path forward. Then right, wrong, and different, we agree. Here's the path. This is where we're going. So I think that is that top line there. Well, the business champions biannual review, that's the most important part to me.
No, I agree, and I asked that because it sets up the next slide well, and you talked about the rainbows and the unicorns, and here's a very busy slide, and we kept it that way on purpose. We talked about this. We talked about what do we want to share, and the truth of the matter is, this is us with our shirt off, dancing. Yep. This is the awkward pain and the evolution of a partnership that took years to make. And are we doing it right? I'd say we're doing it better. Mm-hmm. And we're still moving, and we're still improving. And these are some of the lessons we learned that we wanted to share with you.
And I think too, as important, the lessons learned usually go through what went wrong first in a slide. Chris talked about it earlier, Eric talked about it. The lessons learned are first in the column on purpose, because that's what it's about. Not, yeah, there was a problem, okay, yeah, what do we learn from that, and how are we not going to do it again?
No, and it's back to how we wanted to set up the relationship. I talk about the purpose, and this was defining the why and the how. We have means, we have rhythms, we have the working team intelligence and capability and technical know-how to do all of this. But defining that up front as you're going to approach a problem and a challenge of this magnitude is going to really help put the momentum behind you instead of raising up roadblocks every time you come to them. And by having that alignment, when you come to things like defining your common goals, when you're looking at requirement flow downs, if we're conveying them during emails, you have someone that is in step with you that says, hey, that's not the way it needs to happen. I need you to change your spec. We need the supply chain to feed that back to the OEMs. We need a partnership. We need a challenge, open conversation where we're not going to get offended with that because we know we have the same common goal. And if we do that right, there are going to be different business KPIs. There are different ones. We're all in different companies. I get that. But when you align on the key ones, you're going to see win-wins. And that was the key we wanted to take away from this, is learn from this, learn from the pain points, reference these, come back to them. Maybe your solution is a little different. But if you start with that open conversation, and you start with the same metrics that are driving both of you, you'll have better synergy up front.
Yeah, and I think this the last point on there, stay accountable. This is one of the things that on both sides. It's not just PCC staying accountable, it's PCC and GE staying accountable to each other on that. Usually, and I'll also even say from my experience, a lot of times it's a one-way street on accountability. This is not like that. So now we'll kind of go through and talk about IP a little bit. Always one of my favorite subjects. And there are some stuff, there's the Colonel's secret sauce, right? There's the secret herbs and spices that just the supplier is going to hold tight. So we try to focus on, in those scenarios, we share as much as we can, what's public, what's out there. The things that get down to the criticality, we kind of hold that back, and it's like, well, let's talk about the outcome. And we really focus on the outcome, not how we got to there, but let's focus on the outcome of this. So that kind of is our way that we get around and we get through that. We do find that a lot of the failure modes as we're going through are common, and we can translate those across. And then these processes that are unique, I think G's been very kind of sensitive to that. Hey, yep, we're good. We're going to try to understand as much as we can, but hey, and then PCC stops and goes, hey, this is where we're drawing the line at right now. And then, going back a couple slides, having that to the top, if we got to go through and escalate up, well, we escalate up and let it happen from there. So, and then pulling in these additional subject matter experts. You heard Eric talk earlier, PCC is building up their team of corporate subject matter experts. GE has their experts as well, where we kind of go through, if the teams, those weekly teams are stumbled, they're at a point we don't know what to do, they don't know how to get it, they're bringing in those people to help solve those problems as well. And that happens on a weekly cadence to go through with that. Anything else you want on the IP side?
Maybe a segue to the next slide, but as we talk about pulling in the subject matter experts, we talked about the puzzle pieces earlier. We talk about who needs to be engaged. It's your maintenance teams, it's your operations teams, it's your industrial engineering, design, materials. You have teams of dozens of very, very intelligent people, very committed people that you're going to pull into this depending on your need. And the key is the respect for those people's time. Do you need them there all the time, or do you only need them there for a portion of it? And I think we found quite a healthy balance, and it was one of those, the earlier t-shirt off moments was looking at where do we meet? Do we do home and aways to discuss certain processes? Who do we bring to those to make sure that we don't waste both the supplier and the OEM time? You want to bring the right resources to the game in order to make sure you're going to win.
Yep. And I think this part always this last part we wanted to put on there. And I will say, there's definitely the working team. Some of them were sensitive about, having their pictures and stuff on there. But the point is recognizing those teams, that first level of boxes that we go through. That's in the 8 Ds, right? Recognize the team. And it's more, Chris touched on this earlier, these people are putting in a little bit extra to going through and making this work and making this happen every week. So it's a little bit more than pizza, but whatever your company thinks is the right thing to do for those people, that kind of get them and recognize them for the work that they've been doing, I think is a critical component of why this works. And that core team at the site level has been for years now kind of holding that down.
No, absolutely, and I think it's a privilege for both of us to be here in front of you representing close to 24 people that have been engaged in this. And we talked about the hours. Chris talked about it specifically, saying, do we take a 6 hour? Do we take a 1 hour every day? And I think those are the initiatives and the efforts that we get the privilege of representing. Did we go through all of it ourselves? No, not necessarily, but it's the effort that is going to make both businesses better that we want to recognize of those team members that did put all of that time in.
So that was it for us. I mean, we've got a few time for that. Does anyone have any questions about anything? We got somebody in the back there.
As a supplier, I'm finding that the industry has evolved so that the customers and OEMs are asking for more and more information regarding our manufacturing process. How did y'all find the balance of understanding IP from the manufacturers versus the customer?
So I'll take it from from the supplier perspective. There's definitely stuff that we just kind of go through. A conversation's going a certain direction, and we stop and say, you know what? We cannot tell you that. That's our competitive advantage. That's our secret. Those are our secrets. So let's rely now on what do you really want to know? The outcome. So there's some things we share what we can, what's common, but when we get down to those specifics, it's like, did we focus on did we deliver what we said we were going to deliver? And that's like the other stuff, that's out of bounds.
I think the other thing we walked through in terms of the PFMEA itself, you're not having to share necessarily the process step. The details in it. I'm going to bring up the example of a heat treat. You have a heat treat oven.
Yep.
I don't care which one. What is the failure mode of putting a piece of metal into an oven? You can go over temp, under temp, too long, too short. Those are 4 quick right off the bat. There's other control ones that you could put in there. There's TC failures that you can put in there. None of those are IP. And so when we had those conversations, we had to take a step back sometimes, and the team had to sit there because we were so in the weeds, right? You're sitting there passionate about what you're trying to solve, and you're saying, well, it's broken. Take a step back. What are we actually trying to determine? And to your point, what's the failure mode? What do we actually care about from that process? And remove some of the IP from that. Now, not everything could be solved that way, but there's a majority as you're filling out those documents that if you take the time, take a step back, really look at what you're trying to get at, the RPN score, you can find a way to kind of overcome some of those IP issues. But for others, we had joint technology agreements. We had NDAs. We have other things that you can put in place. And to your perfect point, we were able to run that up because we had high senior leadership buy-in to work that through the legal teams for us so that when we met the next time, we had the appropriate controls in place from a legal and a compliance perspective to discuss.
Great question. Anybody else?
How long does this take to get to this point?
So I think we were looking back at the original starting point. I think it was Christine had was 2020, September 2020 was like the very basis of just talking about it and kind of laying down that playbook roadmap.
The purpose
slide was from 4 years ago. We took some stuff out, but the point that was 4 years ago.
Second part question. How long did it take you to join PFMEA?
It's still happening. It's still ongoing.
So the question was, how long has it taken us to do the PFMEA to this point? I would say we've been heavily working on it more for 2 years. And a lot of that has been through the team deciding if it's sensitive. I won't say IP because we're not discussing the IP, but if it's sensitive material, if it's specific process, we'll travel the team to the site and we'll discuss it there. So some of those, it's a monthly. And we had a monthly rigor where they would go and visit for 3 days a week. They would work Monday in office, go travel down to Kentucky from Cincinnati, and they would spend 3 days there. And the team would sequester themselves into a conference room and just work through it. And that rhythm was there for almost 2 years.
So, right, I mean, just like Chris was saying earlier, it doesn't happen overnight. All right, anybody, last call?
They want to go.
Oh, we got one.
So to your point, it doesn't happen overnight, right? What do you put in place for just defined scope of work? Because personally, what I find is sometimes the personnel will change on both the customer and the OEM, the customer and the OEM, the customer and the supplier. And so the scope will change because there's different personalities, perspectives involved in that. What do you put in there for stop gaps to say, hey, this was already defined, the two companies have agreed on this, and move forward?
When we kind of had that playbook, setting up took a lot of time to go through, and having that, this is what we agreed to, this is what we're going to measure, that is established and in there. So when it goes through, and people change, and maybe they want something else, we go back to the playbook and said, this is what we agreed to. And I will say, I can't emphasize this enough, having those executive leaders on both companies being involved really eliminates that kind of, like, no, that's not what we agreed to. Yep, you're right. Move on.
Or challenge us if we grew the scope.
Yep.
If we at the working team level were, we want to go focus on this because this is really important this week. We have an event. We have a new non-conformance. We go, no, that was outside of scope. Yes, we have to deal with it, but that might be a different team. We talked about the resources. We protect the resources that are dedicated to just this. And when we bring that in front of an executive and they say, why are you having them work on this other thing? What is that impacting in terms of our shared agreed KPIs? We have to look at ourselves in the mirror and say, you're right, we need to go back to our original playbook.
All right. No more hands? All right, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.